to get their sleep. But that kind of dedication is like, it makes me feel I'm normal. You know, like that staying up late to meet those deadlines is a part of the process, and that's really amazing. What would you have for advice for students next year who take this? Isabella, what would you, if you were talking to a student who was going to take this and was like, I'm super excited to do this next summer, like, what would you say to them? What would your one piece of advice be?
Well, I would say work hard, definitely, because even for me, it was very challenging, honestly, being younger than pretty much all the group. At first I was scared to do the inking because I think I'd mess up. And yeah, so just work at it. You never know what you could accomplish.
How about now? What would you give for advice for next year?
My advice would be I read Patrick's reflection, just meet your deadlines, try your hardest, and like Claus said, or someone, it might have been Patrick, just who cares what your first draft is. If the deadline is right then, just accept it. It's art.
Yeah, I think a really big part of the 24-hour comic challenge and this one-week comic challenge is really like hitting this point, because I think a lot of people focus a lot on making art look awesome, but they don't really get to experience the sheer bliss of actually meeting a deadline. Even if the work isn't where you want it to be, you always got next time to do it, and I think that was one of the big things that we sat on. Now, you mentioned Klaus. I kind of want to hear some Klaus stories from the class. Just something that you thought was memorable from your time. I mean, working with this like world-renowned Marvel and DC comic.
Well, we got to work with Klaus, and we got to look at all of our panels and how we were doing to critique us and see give us feedback. And one thing he told us was that we had a ton of panels on one page, which doesn't really fly. If not done right, and ours was really done right, and we couldn't really change it because we had a deadline. And I asked a lot of questions and gave a lot of things that I knew we could change, and I felt like I was one of the few people who, talked a lot to Klaus, and he kept coming back to me and saying, it's like, just like, do you have anything to add? And I was like, you just say that to me? Like, it's kind of just weird to like be there with Klaus, actually interacting with him. Like, he's no human being like anyone else, so it's very cool.
Yeah, it was incredibly nerve-wracking to put my pencils in front of Klaus Janson, who is like the comic book artist, and I kind of like gingerly like put down the pages in front of him. I was like, here are the pages. Oh God, don't hurt me. But it was amazing. Like when he looked at my pages and started talking about them. He's basically just a living font of comics information, and you just hope that you can retain all of the stuff he tells you because it's genius and brilliant, and he looks at the tiniest little details of your comic and he's like, maybe if you added like 3 lines here, it would make the entire panel be perfect and explain exactly what you wanted to do. And I'm like, how did you do that? And it was inspiring, and I loved every second of it. I nerded out big time.
I have to say the most memorable part for me is when he taught us how to ink, because so far I've been self-taught. I've never really gotten any good advice on how to do inking with a brush. I've never tried it. I've only used pens and read from books and pretty much done it by myself, so I thought that was really useful and helpful.
I truly believe that Klaus is the Yoda of the comic world. I mean, it is amazing how precise he is, like how he pays attention to the smallest detail, as Jeremy said. I remember we were showing him our pencils for our comic strip, and he was looking at one panel in particular, and it was a close-up of this guy grabbing another guy's wrist. And he says, "What is this?" And we said, "Oh, well, it's a guy grabbing another guy's wrist." And he says, something like, how's the audience supposed to know this? We said, "Oh, well, it's kind of And he spends the next 20 minutes telling us about storytelling and how to never assume that the audience will know anything. And now I know much more than I did.
What really inspired me about classes when he was talking about how he thinks and what his mentors taught him. See, I missed out on probably about 15 years of my artwork because of my disability, and all my art is all like one-dimensional on paper. And he was saying that you have to make one-dimensional, three-dimensional to die. And I was, because you can see the characters sticking out at you a lot in comic books. And the way he said how he does it is he makes like thicker, bolder ink lines on the shoulders muscle. And when it gets under the tricep, it gets a little thinner lines. And that just made sense. And I know I've still got a lot to learn, even though I'm older than these guys, but these guys are a lot better than me.
So we got about 15 minutes left of the panel. I can't believe the time has gone that fast. Does anybody in the audience have any questions that they'd like to shout out? And if you do, feel free. I can insert my own question. But if you do have some questions, start thinking about them. I'll try to answer some of those.
Patrick, just right before we jump into Q&A, I just wanted to kind of pass along something from Klaus. Klaus has got some prior commitments as someone of his stature does. And I'll plug someone that does not need plugging. Klaus is down in 4807, selling original art and signing stuff. When you're starting your artistic career, and even as you're continuing it, two of the hardest things are the discipline to hit your deadlines and to finish work, even when you'd like to keep on working on it, and to have the humility to kind of take critiques, whether they're from peers or whether they're from industry legends like Klaus Janson or anyone in between, like me and Patrick. And Klaus was incredibly impressed. Klaus teaches at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, teaches a sophomore level class, and he was incredibly impressed with these students, that they were able to meet those deadlines, have that discipline and take critiques. They were really open to suggestions and ideas, and knock them out of the park in the heart. So just wanted to have that.
Yeah. It was kind of funny because I expected Thursday morning. This isn't like me not believing in you guys, but I've been teaching for about 5 years, and I so expected at least 2 pages not to be turned in. I was like, minimum 2 pages are not going to be turned in. But sure enough, at 10 a.m., I had every single page in my hand. I did not have to go track down any one of the students. Each group turned in their stuff, and I have to say that this was like I just feel like I went through the most flawless teaching experience that I could have ever gone through, and I'm like, wow, that's what that feels like. And I want to thank you guys for giving that to me as a teacher, and I think Alonzo feels the same way. This was not a hard thing to teach. It was actually quite enjoyable. It was hard not getting as much sleep as we could have, but you guys get sleep later. Question